they are passing out the evaluation. So while she's doing that, my name's Gayle Mack, and I am from Atlanta, Georgia, northeast Georgia, or northeast Atlanta. And I've been coming to the Dowsers for a while. I co-speak with Mary Hardy a lot. And the last 2 years we had conflicting conferences, so they kind of trumped, so we were over there since we committed before we had the dates for this one. So, let me see, let me do this. No, that doesn't work. Okay. So, the spiral breath came to me about 6 years ago. And before I got the spiral breath, I've been medical intuitive. I've been channeling since I was 3. I went to Egypt in '93 and I became my light body, and that set the course of my life, and it changed what I was doing. And then my soul's purpose then was to teach people and show people how to achieve that state of bliss and that ascension. And if I can do it, anybody can do it. And I was doing quite well with that. And then 6 years ago, I had a brain injury. And I knew I was hurt. I got hit in the back of the head at the base of the skull. And my photographic memory and my perfect recall was gone in a flash. I couldn't spell my name for 3 weeks. I couldn't remember sentences back to back for almost 4 years, even if I wrote them myself. So being frustrated, I went to my doctor about 6 weeks, 8 weeks out from the incident, and I said, "What is wrong with me? I'm acting like I'm illiterate." "I'm not illiterate. What's the matter with me?" And he says, "Honey, you had a brain injury, and you're lucky to be walking, talking, thinking, breathing. You're lucky to be alive." It never dawned on me that I had a brain injury. I knew all the other injuries because all those injuries and the pain reminded me of the physical stuff, but it never entered my mind that I had a brain injury. And then I got mad. Because I'm in this allowance, and I just, it's what I've been given, and I'll work through it, and yada, yada. Then I got mad. And then I went home, and I sat down to pray. So usually when I get mad, it's about this long. If it's longer than this long, then you really, so, but I went home, and I said, "God, show me how to heal my brain. Show me how to be better than I was before the incident, because I refuse to accept to be a victim of circumstances, and I refuse to accept this is the way I'm going to be for the rest of my life." And in my meditation, I saw this emerald green spiral. And so, this. Oh, wait a minute, let me, that magic little arm button, there it goes, sweet. Yeah. There should be, oh, there it is. So this spiral came to me, and I saw this emerald green spiral just floating in front of me in the air. And I kept looking at it, and I heard "breathe it in," and I'm just looking at it, and because of my experiences, this wasn't an odd thing, but I wasn't quite sure because of the circumstances that I was seeing what I was seeing. And I put my hand through it, and it moved like the dust and the light, and it moved, and then it refocused into the spiral.
You saw this?
Yes, I saw just the green spiral in the beginning, and then as I was guided to breathe it in, as I started to inhale, the tail came into my heart, went to my brain stem, went to the occipital, came to the crown chakra, down to my third eye, came into my nostrils, into my limbic system, and out the amygdalas on either side of my third eye. And as I exhaled, it became a goldy color, and then it blended in with the colors around my body that were mother of pearl.
How long did this take until after you said, I'm going to,
It was about 15 minutes into my prayer and meditation from the time I asked. So I'm here to tell you, we are in the times that you get what you ask for. So it's really, really good for you to be conscious of how you speak, what you're thinking, because your thoughts are energy, and if you think it and you don't speak it, and you go, how did that happen? It's because you birthed it into reality. So it's time that you be really conscious. You are all here because you've chosen to be here to be the way showers for what's coming in the future, and we are holding the light. And head injury or not, I was holding the light, and I needed to pick up where I left off. So God gave me the spiral breath. So as I continued to breathe and the spiral came out, it came back into my heart with my next inhalation in emerald green. And then this time it was in slow motion. It filled the center of my heart, and then it slowly crept up when that was full to my brainstem, and it filled the area of the brainstem because that was the area of impact. It went up to the occipital as the plates of my skull were shifted, and it filled that area, moved to the crown chakra, filled that area. That breath took forever, but God put it in slow motion so my conscious mind could grasp what was happening and I would remember it. And then it continued to come into my nose and up into my limbic system, and I'll go into that in a few minutes, and then out through the amygdalas. So as I kept breathing, then my pace started to pick up and I started to normalize in my breath. The spiral started to do its normal cycle, and pretty soon I started to feel a little vibration in my amygdalas, which are these. And this is your limbic system. And I'll show you shortly where the limbic system is. It's in between the lobes of the brain. In the amygdalas here, when you are locked in the backside of your amygdalas, that's your fear, your anger, your depression, OCD, people that are excessive worry, excessive thinkers, they're locked in that back amygdala. And when you, through breath work or prayer or some kind of mystical or spiritual experience, you move the energy forward into the front part of that amygdala, you can often hear a click as it flips forward, and you move into your joy, your happiness, and your bliss. And what happens is then it activates the frontal lobe of your brain. And your frontal lobe, if you take your palm and you put it over your forehead, everything under your palm is your frontal lobe. So I had already been teaching the glia brain and the limbic system and activating your frontal lobes for higher consciousness and moving multidimensional. So I had an understanding of what was going on, but I got to experience from the ground up again because it had been a long time that I had been going in and out of multidimensional realities. And I kind of forgot, sort of, what it was like to be unawakened. And so it actually gave me more compassion for the people that were coming to my group.
can you give a timeline on that? Like on what you're talking about right now? The absence of not having that experience? You had it when you were a young child?
Oh, so I was born open.
Right.
So at 3, words and wisdom would come out of my mouth. That was greater than my vocabulary at 3 years old. I would see people and I would go up and give them a message from their angels or a loved one that had passed, and sometimes it scared the bejeebies out of them, and my mom would go, she hears things. So one day, this lady at church, she was shaking me and she goes, because her son had passed, and she was very emotional. And he kept saying, would you tell my mom not to cry anymore? Because I'm with grandma and I'm okay. And so when I said, Bobby asked you not to cry anymore, and she said, did you know my Bobby? And I said, he's standing right there. Well, she just fell apart. So she's freaking out. She starts shaking me. Why would you be so cruel? Now, I'm like five or six. And my mom looks over and she sees this lady shaking her child, and she comes running over, and here's the minister running over too. And he says, what are you doing? And so I told my mom what Bobby was telling me. I said, you have a picture of him in a red and white striped shirt and blue jeans, and he's got a ball cap on, and he's holding a bat. And you go to sleep with that picture every night. She said, how do you know that? I said, because he's telling me that. He's here? I said, yes. And he wants you, he's with your mom, and he wants you to stop crying because he's good. And she kneeled down and she felt him hug her. And she healed in that moment. So for me, sometimes, they weren't, that gracious, but most of the time they were. And sometimes I would just walk by somebody in a restaurant and I would just clean them off. Mothers would come up and say, did you just heal my child? So I've been wide open. It's just, for me, it's been what I've known all my life. And in my teen years, that was kind of weird. But I survived the... Well, 6 years ago, I had a head injury. Yeah. So 6 years ago, March. And in that split second, my life changed. And all my life as I knew it changed, and I had to be, not become somebody new. I had to reinvent myself and how I worked. Yeah. Oh. So the spiral breath really put that back together. So when I teach the spiral breath, I started sharing with people how I was healing, because once I started doing the spiral breath, and in that first time, as I continued to breathe, and it got into like a pattern, and it was automatic, then I started to feel pressure, and there was a pressure in my head nobody could relieve, and that pressure started to increase, and it was like, I didn't ask for this, and I heard, shh, breathe. Trust and breathe. So I kept on breathing, and that pressure got more intense, more intense, more intense. And then I heard, I moved into the frontal amygdalas, and that pressure came out through the amygdalas and the front of my forehead. My lobes, both sides of the brain engaged, so they were both working at the same time, and I went into a full brain gamma brainwave experience where the brain waves were going 40 plus times a second, and it just put me in this bliss, and I felt that energy move into my brainstem, then connect through my neck. My heart opened up, and the energy went all the way down to my spine, and then I started to heal. And I was healing in leaps and bounds. So every day I did the spiral breath when I first woke up. I did the spiral breath before I went to bed. And if any time I felt like I was uneasy or I was being moved off center, I would stop and touch myself, my heart, and start that breath. So what's happened over these years, that because when I start my breath and I touch my heart, my body said, we're doing spiral breath. And now, before I can finish my first breath, I'm lined up because it knows the pattern and what's coming next. But to start, we do the spiral breath. So then and then real quick, and then I'll go on. But as I continued to do the spiral breath, then I had this triangle, or the Merkaba, that as above, so below star, came over my heart. And then another one came above my head. And they're moving both clockwise and counterclockwise at the same time. And then this bigger one came, this was the first one around my heart, and then this one came here. then this bigger one here came in, so it was connecting my heart and my mind and the limbic system. And when I went into that full bliss, this big one encompassed my whole body. So I'm sitting inside of my Merkaba and I'm visually seeing this swirling color and these Merkabas moving around and swirling as my body was healing. And it's a shame that I haven't found somebody who can animate what was in my, in my vision, in my sight, but I'm working on it. Come on in. So, with the power of breath. So in the book of Genesis, prana is described as the breath of spirit. And this is why breath is so important. And prana in Sanskrit is absolute energy. Prana and breath create vital life force energy. And if you're low in vital life force energy, you're low in your immune system, in your clarity, and when you increase your breath, you increase vital life force. So with my spiral breath, because my vital life force had a kink in it, my breath, the spiral breath, was putting it back in and was charging up my vital life force. So your breath is mostly unconscious, and most people don't realize, they're not really aware of their breath. I'm also a naturopath, and when people come in, I observe when they come in and I watch how they breathe, because if they sigh, wrong one, come down. If they sigh frequently, I know they're sad. And I'll say, what's going on? Nothing. About 10 minutes later, then they're telling me something. If you're angry, you breathe more rapidly. And if people have suppressed anger, they still have a huff to them and things are pushed, they're trying to force things along. When you're in fear or overwhelmed, or you're preventing your feelings from coming forth holding your tongue, you hold your breath. So people, when they're in fear, don't breathe. And when overwhelmed, you go. And if you're saying something and you go, you're holding your breath, or your breath is shallow. And when you do that, you're depleting your life force energy. And when you're injured or you have discomfort, you don't breathe normal. You have short breaths. And those who have open mouth breathing, they have a tendency to have a more compromised immune system because the nose has filters that filter out debris. So when you breathe through your mouth, you're taking everything in right into the digestive system. So people who breathe with their mouth open have more of a compromised immune system. So when you consciously direct your breath and you focus and intent when you do your breath, you can heighten your enlightenment, you can heighten your healing process, and you increase your dowsing skills. Because my dowsing skills at one time, they were like hit and miss, and especially after I had my head injury. I couldn't trust my dowsing skills. It's like, well, yeah, whatever. So it was moving all different directions. What was yes and no was backwards, and because I was mixed up, and my brain, my nervous system was cattywampus. Some places were turned on, some were turned off. And when you have an injury or you have a trauma and your nervous system, your brain switches off your nervous system in an area to help you heal, but it doesn't always get switched back on. So I discovered that when I was standing, my nervous system was like, what's going on here? When I was sitting or laying down, it was relaxed, I could think better. And as soon as I stood up, it's like, it was gone. It wasn't that I forgot what I was going into the room for. I was just like it never happened. So the breathing actually helps, and it empowers. When you have purposeful, meaningful, intentful breathing, you increase your vital life force. Vital life force increases your organs. your body systems, your tissues, your cells of your body. It increases your mental power and your clarity. And when your clarity is increased, your confidence is increased. And that's when you're dowsing, how it affects your dowsing skills. Sorry. One more time. Okay. And breathing, if you know, breathing shifts emotions, and it also helps you heal and move emotional wounds. So when you're doing the spiral breath, if you know you have an emotional wound that you're working on, whether it's forgiveness or your feelings were hurt, you can ask, when was the first time I had that feeling? And you hold that in your mind and you start doing the spiral breath. And the more you breathe, you start activating that energy. And the more you clear your chakras and you clear your energy and your emotions, the faster you're going to clear your emotional wounds. When you tap into the first time you had that feeling or had that experience, your body will eventually show you. And when you heal that first time, everything else heals as well. So you could chip away what happened last week and last month and last year, but if you go to the very first time you had it, all of that gets healed at the first time, or at the same time. So it's important to have your breath and to have intention when you're doing your purposeful breath. And then also, too, when you increase your life force, you increase your stamina, you increase your well-being, and you also activate those frontal lobes, which increase your consciousness. And again, spiral breath. So, focused breathing will help you quiet the mind. And when you unify the energy of your mind and your body, and your mind and your breath, you become more alert and you become more aware. I found that during those first 4 years, really, my skills and my alertness, I was so awake before the injury that I knew who was coming in the door, and I didn't even have to be looking at the door. I would just say, hello, so-and-so, if they were coming in. Or I would look and I'd say, Mom, Sherry's calling, and then the phone would ring. So I knew who was coming in. I would walk to the front door and have the door open as people were pulling into my office. So I had that foresight, which we do when you are in universal alignment and you are accessing that higher consciousness. You have those few seconds of, you can see 30 seconds, 3 minutes, 3 hours, 3 days in advance. And that's what some of that deja vu is, when you go, wow, didn't I just do that? It's because you are awake and you experience that and you have that energy in your energy field. So in breathing, your left nostril and your right nostril, it tells you, it'll give you understanding of where you are in your breath. And I didn't realize this in the beginning, but when you are doing your breath, if you hold one nostril, close one nostril, and you breathe in, if it's a little difficult to take a breath, that is switched off. If you hold the other nostril and you breathe in, that's your dominant. So your breath will switch every 60 to 90 minutes from your right nostril to your left nostril. So if you're trying to meditate and your mind is going all over the place, you are most likely breathing out of your left nostril and you're dominant. If you are fidgety and you can't sit still, you're most likely in your right nostril. Because your right nostril and your right dominant breath works the physical actions, and breathing through your left nostril is your mental actions. But if you breathe purposely through both nostrils, that's where your spiritual actions preside, and you can get your mind and your thoughts together at the same time. You become one. So you hear that all the time, become one, or get one, single-minded. People say single-minded. So when you're breathing with both nostrils, you become single-minded. Yes?
What do you do if you have a deviated septum and you can't breathe outside?
So if you're not going to have it fixed physically, you can actually go back before that happened And there's techniques of 2-pointing, there's intention, and you can do it with your breath. And you can actually, there's ways of physically moving. Well, you can bypass it because your body has compensated, but you can also kind of put it back into place too.
Chiropractor.
Pardon?
A chiropractor can do that for you.
A chiropractor can do it, yes, without having to do surgery. Are you a chiropractor?
No,
Have
he
that
is up
done?
in front, though.
Okay, somebody in front is a chiropractor? Oh, sweet, yeah. So, if you know him, he could do that. I can't do that for you because I'm not, and I wouldn't know how to do it, but I did do my own one time. And when I was married, my husband heard this, and he goes, "Are you all right?" And I said, "Yeah." "Is my nose straight?" And he goes, "Oh, for Pete's sake." He threw the towel at me and well, I had another incident, and I kind of shoved my nose. I hit my nose on the top of my car, and it kind of shoved it up. And the doctor said that they would have to do surgery on it. And I said, "You just do that thing, you know, that they do for football players. Grab your nose and smack your hand." And he goes, "We don't do that." He said, "We're going to have to do surgery, but we won't leave a scar." It's like a big scar. And it's like, So I waited for the swelling to go down, and I went into the bathroom, and I looked, and I was like, Yep. Yeah. I'm an odd duck. Yep, so it did save a lot of hassle, and it was straight, and then I went to my chiropractor, and I said, "Can you check this again?" And he was like, "Oh my gosh." Because when I drove to the chiropractor's office, he said, "How did you get here?" Because he's talking to me, and he said, "How many fingers do I have up?" And I said, "I don't know, can you stand over here?" And he said, "Why?" I said, "Because I can't see you there." He said, how did you get here?" I said, "Well, when I had to turn left, I did this, and if I had to turn right, I did this." So, and then I fixed it, and he just tapped it back into place, and I'm good to go. So, oh well. So, breathing with both nostrils is what you want when you're doing your meditation and when you're doing your spiral breath. It actually adds and creates more energy to your spiral breath than your focused breathing. So there's different types of breathing that are going in. So I'm seeing people are yawning, so I'm going to pick up a little bit on this. So in the high breathing, when you're breathing just in the top of your chest, you're not getting a full breath, and so you can get tired more easily. And people that their shoulders will come up, and they take short breaths, and they're just breathing up to here. Mid-breathing it's a more quickened breath, but it's when you're doing a walk or you're exerting yourself, you have a tendency to go to mid-breathing, so it's a shorter breath. And then some people, when they breathe, their whole belly expands, and there's no energy up in their lungs. And each one of these stops the flow of energy. They have a purpose, but they also stop the flow of vital life force energy. And when you put them all together, it's a complete, they call it complete purposeful breath. And it brings the oxygen to the brain, and it brings oxygen to the body. When you roll from the belly to the lower abdomen, to the upper abdomen, to the chest, and then you exhale all the breath. And they call that complete breathing. So when you do that whole combination, if you watch a baby breathe, babies do that. And if you're sitting there, you can put your hands on your lower ribs, and you can take a breath, and you can feel your lower ribs expand. And then if you can watch your lower ribs and feel the air go into your upper rib cage. And if you continue that breath, you can feel your chest rise. And then when you complete your breath, you exhale, and before you exhale, you just bring your diaphragm in just a little bit, and it pushes the air into your upper lungs, so you get a full breath. And the first time you do it, it feels awkward, but the more you purposely guide your breath from the lower abdomen into the mid, chest, tighten your diaphragm, push that up, then you exhale with your diaphragm pushing out all the air from your lungs. when you start breathing like this and you make this a conscious effort, pretty soon it becomes your unconscious breath. And every time you take a breath, you're breathing in vital life force. Okay. And I just kind of went through this. And I'm going to show you where to get this. Let's see. And I have it larger. This breathing technique came from Hindu yoga science of breath. It's called the Science of Breath. And it's an out-of-print book, but you can go online and you can get the free download. So take that, a picture of that or write that down, and you can get it and then just make a copy, print a copy off from yourself. But it's really good, and it talks about breath, and it talks about breath. This is how they breathed in the ancient days, is what they taught us. And when we get stressed and with the day-to-day stuff, we forget to breathe.
What is the name? I can't.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's, the book is The Science of Breath, and the website is Holy Books.
I'm sorry,
H,
Asian. I couldn't cough.
okay, Holy, Holy, Books, hyphen, Lichtenberg Press, LICHTENBERGPRESS.net, DNA, hyphen, SSL.com.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And then Science of Breath. And then I have that bigger at the end of the slide. Okay. So as we're going to be doing the spiral breath, I'm going to ask you to do the spiral breath when we get into it with both nostrils, to breathe both nostrils and to focus on your breath. And when you focus on your breath and you're doing this breath work, you may start to feel a little tingle, a little whirl. I've had people, one fella, one time he didn't think it was going to work. He just came because his girlfriend told him he had to go. And he had this diamond show up where on his third eye, the skin raised up. He was very tan, and it was white as could be. And when he looked in the mirror, he started laughing because he also had that feelings, and he moved into a higher frequency and higher consciousness. And he thought his girlfriend was just a little woo-woo until he experienced it, but he did it with the breath. So you will, with the breath, activate your higher consciousness and your extrasensory perceptions. And you will notice as you're going that you're going to see things before they come into your room. You're going to hear things that are soundless. And this is where your intuition and your higher guides are listening to you. And it's also the space where you're going to connect when you're doing your dowsing. And again, the spiral breath, it connects the heart and the mind. Okay, so in the spirituality, I work with Mary Magdalene, and I did Mary Magdalene tours in France for a long time. So in the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, Jesus says, there where is the noose lies the treasure. So this was struck me, even though I knew the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, it was once I received the spiral breath that I got the true meaning of noose. Even though I knew it and I read it, it didn't sink in. So Mary Magdalene says to Jesus when she sees him in the cave, Rabboni, how is it that I see you? Is it through my psyche or is it through my soul? And he says, it is neither through the soul nor the spirit, but through the noose between the two, which sees the vision. And the noose in Sanskrit is the finest part of the soul. It's that spider web thread that connects the heart and the limbic system and the 1,000-petal lotus. And it's why, I believe, they beheaded and hung the priests and priestesses during the Crusades, because they were trying to break the noose, the finest part of the soul, the people that were teaching the masses how to move into their frontal lobes, how to manifest, how to be happy. how to be in a state of grace and love and move multidimensional. Because Jesus says, all these things I do, you can do and more. And he and the disciples and Mary Magdalene and the priests and priestesses of that age, they were teaching you how to activate the frontal lobe and have your direct connection. You didn't need to go to a priest and have, or a minister, and have them be the conduit between you and God. You just needed to do it yourself and open up.
So are you talking about the pineal?
Yes, and that'll come, well, the pineal is part of that, it's part of the limbic system, so it's part of a whole. It's like a system, and I'll show you that shortly. So, and so the nous, again, is that energetic thread and that connection between the heart and the 1,000-petal lotus. And the 1,000-petal lotus, well, let me go here. So, like I said earlier, we have the ability to do God-like powers. We have that ability to be the immaculate mirror of God. This was one of the names that Jesus gave Mary Magdalene, the immaculate mirror of God. And it's written in Psalms, I think, and in some places where Mary Magdalene is referred to as the immaculate mirror of God, meaning that she was so pure that she was able to do what Jesus did and bring forth the ascension and be in that ascended, multidimensional, unconditional loving space. And she was teaching the priestesses and the priests and the people how to hold that frequency. And the ancient ones called being in that fully realized human being state anthropos. So sometimes you will see that in the ancient readings where the word anthropos is, and whoever was mentioned as anthropos, or that you can be anthropos, it means that you were fully realized and that your limbic system and your frontal lobes were active, your 1,000-petal lotus was active, and you had a direct connection to divine I am. So I keep coming back to the spiral breath because it has the limbic system in it. So how this comes to dowsing is the more you do your spiral breath and the more you bring vital energy, you're going to increase your higher consciousness, you're going to increase your clarity, you're going to increase your dowsing skills. So oftentimes now when I pick up my pendulum, I already have the answer before I let it spin. And because my pendulum, it'll confirm what I already know. So our hearts are 5,000 times more magnetic than our brain. This is why we have the power, and the power of prayer works, and the power of healing. When you are clear in your heart and you're in an unconditional loving state and you project what you want with joy, it goes out. It goes through the ley lines. It goes from person to person. It connects. That's why the waves of prayer go around the earth. They measured energy and the heart energy up in space, where they monitor in space in one of the satellites. They monitor the energies coming off the earth, and they noticed that on 9/11 there was a huge spike 20 minutes after the planes hit. And they looked, and that spike lasted for 3 days. And what they came to was that the hearts of people that were, their hearts were touched, and they were pouring love, and they were saying prayers. They were connected, and it was being registered from the earth in outer space, because the heart, the power of the heart is so impressive and so powerful. And they also have done testings where they've taken astronauts and they've had them wired up, not knowing what's going on, and their family would think about them, and if it was a daughter, it would register in a part of a brain that they would use when they were present with them. And the wife would think about making love with her husband, and it would register in that part of the brain. And he had no idea what was going on, but they were in California, and he was in space. So the brain and the heart are very powerful. So yes, your thoughts and your words and your actions, they are powerful. Oh,
That's a deep imagine it's inspiring.
it is. And that, in that spiral, so much is in that so many things in nature are in that Fibonacci spiral. So talking about the glia brain, I'm going to do this real quick because I want to have time to do your breath work. So the glia brain, you have two brains and matters in your brain. You have the neural brain, which is the gray matter, and you have the glia brain, which is the white matter. And the neural brain is your thinking, your mental consciousness, and your glia brain is your spiritual. The more you breathe and the more you move through your emotions and you feel your emotions, the more you activate your glia brain and your glia cells. And they start to multiply in the frontal lobes. When they dissected Einstein's brain, the only difference between his brain and our brain is that he had a massive amount of glia cells in his frontal lobe. So he was processing very fast and taking information from the universal source and being able to bring it into the physical realm. And the glia cells, they encapsulate the brain, they encapsulate the organs, the nervous system, and it's that seamless insulation that we call the myelin sheath. So those that have some kind of immune compromise, if you feed the myelin sheath with your breath and with omegas, which rebuilds the myelin sheath, when you increase the production of glia cells, you can repair the myelin sheath from the nerves and along the organs, and that's the information from the brain to the body and the body to the brain. That's how your information, and with essential oils, you can put oils on the feet and taste them in the mouth in just a few minutes. It's because it's traveling along the glia cells and the myelin sheath. So as you're doing your breath work, when you do breath work, you increase this neural insulator. Okay, these are glia cells. I'm just going to do this real quick. These are different types of glia cells. Your microglia is the one that goes after your bad pathogens that are causing you to have some compromise in your immune. So all of these, see how they wrap? Their little tendrils wrap. They're like octopus. And when there's a break along the nerve ending, then they stretch those tendrils and they wrap it up and they repair. And then they connect. And that's where, if you're familiar with Joe Dispenza, he talks about repatterning your brain, and it's the glia cells, they connect, and the neurons, they connect, and they wire, and the more you have the same thought, it's going to fortify that thought. When you change your thought and you consistently revisit the new thought, you don't give energy to the old thoughts, and they start to die off and disconnect, and you strengthen this bond on the glia cells, and you rebuild new brain, and new brain cells that support your thought. Okay, and in the glia, in the nervous system, glia cells outnumber neurons 6 to 1, and in the white matter, they're 100 to 1. And that's what one of the cells look like. So, here is the limbic system. And the limbic system is where the pineal and the pituitary here, the hypothalamus, your amygdalas are here.